Chapter 13. Why in man's reason, fantasy may be perceived as reality. My dear and kind grandfather, be so kind as to explain to me, if only in a general way, why those beings there are such that they take the ephemeral for the real. To this question of his grandson, Beelzebub replied thus. It was only during later periods that the three-brained beings of the planet Earth began to have this particularity in their psyche, and just this particularity arose in them only because their predominant part, which was formed in them as in all three-brained beings, gradually allowed other parts of their total presences to perceive every new impression without what is called being-Partkdolg-duty. But just merely as, in general, such impressions are perceived by the separate independent localizations existing under the name of being centers present in the three-brained beings, or, as I should say in their language, they believe everything anybody says, and not solely that which they themselves have been able to recognize by their own sane deliberation. In general, any new understanding is crystallized in the presence of these strange beings only if Smith speaks of somebody or something in a certain way. And then if Brown says the same, the hearer is quite convinced it is just so and couldn't possibly be otherwise. Thanks merely to this particularity of their psyche, and to the fact that the said writer was much spoken about in the said manner, most of the beings there at the present time are quite convinced that he is indeed a very great psychologist, and has an incomparable knowledge of the psyche of the beings of his planet. But, as a matter of fact, when I was on that planet for the last time and, having heard of the said writer, once went myself especially to see him, on quite another matter. He was, according to my understanding, not only like all the other contemporary writers there, that is to say, extremely limited, and as our dear Mullah Nasser Aden would say, able to see no further than his nose. But as regards any knowledge of the real psyche of the beings of his planet in real conditions, he might safely even be called totally illiterate. I repeat that the story of this writer is a very characteristic example showing the extent to which, in the three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, particularly in the contemporary ones, the realization of being-Partkdolg-duty is absent, and how their own subjective being convictions formed by their own logical deliberations are never, as in general it is proper to three-brained beings, crystallized in them, but only those are crystallized which depend exclusively only upon what others say about the given question. It was only because they failed to realize being-Partkdolg-duty, which realization alone enables a being to become aware of genuine reality, that they saw in the said writer some perfection or other which was not there at all. This strange trait of their general psyche, namely, of being satisfied with just what Smith or Brown says, without trying to know more, become rooted in them already long ago, and now they no longer strive at all to know anything cognizable by their own active deliberations alone. Concerning all this, it must be said that neither the organ Kundabuffer, which their ancestors had, is to blame, nor its consequences which, owing to a mistake on the part of certain sacred individuals, were crystallized in their ancestors and later began to pass by heredity from generation to generation. But they themselves were personally to blame for it, and just on account of the abnormal conditions of external ordinary being existence which they themselves have gradually established and which have gradually formed in their common presence just what has now become their inner evil god called self-calming. But all this you yourself, later on, will understand, when I shall have given you, as I have already promised, more information about that planet which has taken your fancy. In any case, I strongly advise you to be very careful in the future in your references to the three-brained beings of that planet, not to offend them in any way. Otherwise, as they also say there, with what may the devil not joke? They might find out about your insulting them and, to use another of their expressions, lay you by the heels. And in the present case, there is no harm in recalling again one of the wise sentences of our dear Mullah Nasser Adam, who says, "Struth, what might not happen in this world? A flea might swallow an elephant." Beelzebub intended to say something more, but at that moment a ship's servant entered and, approaching, handed him an Etherogram in his name. When Beelzebub had finished listening to the contents of the said Etherogram, and the ship's servant had gone, Hassan turned to Beelzebub again with the following words. "Dear grandfather, please go on talking about the three-centered beings arising and existing on that interesting planet called Earth." Beelzebub, having looked at his grandson again with a special smile, and having made a very strange gesture with his head, continued to speak as follows. Chapter 14. The beginnings of perspectives promising nothing very cheerful. I must tell you first that the three-brained beings on that planet also had in the beginning presences similar to those possessed in general by all what are called Keschapmartnian, three-centered beings arising on all the corresponding planets of the whole of our great universe. And they also had the same, as it is called, duration of existence, as all the other three-brained beings. All the various changes in their presences began for the most part after the second misfortune occurred to this planet, during which misfortune the chief continent of that ill-fated planet, then existing under the name Atlantis, entered within the planet. And from that time on, as little by little they created for themselves all sorts of conditions of external being existence, thanks to which the quality of their radiations went steadily from bad to worse. Grey nature was compelled gradually to transform their common presences by means of various compromises and changes, in order to regulate the quality of the vibrations which they radiated and which were required chiefly for the preservation of the well-being of the former parts of that planet. For the same reason, grey nature gradually so increased the numbers of the beings there that, at the present time, they are now breeding on all the lands formed on that planet. The exterior forms of their planetary bodies are all made alike, and of course, in respect of size and in their other subjective particularities, they are each quoted, just as we are, in accordance with the reflection of heredity, with the conditions at the moment of conception, and with the other factors that serve in general as the causes for the arising and formation of every being. They also differ among themselves in the color of their skin and in the conformation of their hair, and these latter particularities are determined in their presences, just as they are everywhere else, by the effects of that part of the planetary surface where the given beings arise and where they are formed until they reach the age of responsible beings, or as they say, until they become adult. As regards their general psyche itself and its fundamental traits, no matter upon what part of the surface of their planet they arise, these traits in all of them have precisely the same particularities, among them being also that property of the three-brained beings there, thanks to which on that strange planet alone, in the whole of the universe, does that horrible process occur among three-brained beings, which is called the process of the destruction of each other's existence, or, as it is called on that ill-fated planet, war. Besides this chief particularity of their common psyche, they are completely crystallized in them, and they unfailingly become a part of their common presences, regardless of where they may arise and exist, functions which exist under the names egoism, self-love, vanity, pride, self-conceit, credulity, suggestibility, and many other properties quite abnormal and quite unbecoming to the essence of any three-brained beings whatsoever. Of these abnormal being particularities, the particularity of their psyche the most terrible for them personally is that which is called suggestibility. Above this extremely strange and singular psychic particularity I shall specially explain to you sometime. Having said this, Beelzebub was thoughtful, and this time no longer than usual, and then, turning again to his grandson, he said, I see that the three-brained beings arising and existing on the peculiar planet called Earth interest you very much. And as during our voyage on the ship Karnak, we shall have willy-nilly to talk about many things just to pass away the time, I will tell you all I can just about these three-brained beings. I think it will be best for your clear understanding of the strangeness of the psyche of the three-brained beings arising on the planet Earth if I relate to you my personal descents to that planet in their order, and the events which occurred there during these descents of mine, of which I myself was a witness. But I personally visited the surface of the planet Earth 6 times in all, and each of these personal visits of mine was brought about by a different set of circumstances. I shall begin with my first descent.